She's just a pretty face. My husband, also my boss, laughed during a client meeting, while I poured their drinks like the perfect little assistant. The client smirked. Interesting. Coming from someone who just signed over controlling shares to his wife. The room went dead silent. I raised my glass. Ex-wife actually. Divorce finalized this morning. I kept the house, the company, and your parking spot. He choked. I smiled sweetly. Next time read my fine print. The coffee burned my fingers as I poured it into David Harris's cup, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. Not when Michael's words were still echoing through the conference room. She's just a pretty face, my husband had said with that casual laugh he used when undermining me. Don't mind her. David Harris, a potential client worth millions to our agency, glanced up at me with something like pity in his eyes. I'd spent 14 hours preparing the presentation he would never see. The one Michael had interrupted 3 minutes in to ask me to serve refreshments instead. That's what broke me. Not the interruption, I'd grown used to those, but the realization that I was standing there in my tailored navy suit with coffee dripping onto my wedding ring while the company I had built was being handed to someone else on a silver platter. Just like the coffee I was serving. It wasn't always like this. 6 years ago when I met Michael at the Chicago Marketing Conference, we were equals. More than equals, I was the one with the industry award nominations. He approached me after my panel presentation, all charm and genuine admiration. Your consumer retention strategy is revolutionary, he'd said, extending his business card. I've been trying to solve that exact problem for Peterson Manufacturing. Would you consider collaborating? Collaboration turned to partnership. Partnership turned to romance. Our small marketing firm in Minneapolis grew as our relationship did. For 2 years we were unstoppable, finishing each other's presentations, clients loving our dynamic approach. When he proposed, it felt like the natural progression of everything wonderful we were building together. To Lily, he toasted at our small wedding reception at Lake Harriet. My partner in every sense of the word. I didn't notice the changes at first. They were too subtle, too easy to explain away. 3 months after the honeymoon, client meetings began happening when I had other commitments. The Richardsons could only meet during your dentist appointment, he'd explain. No big deal, I took notes for you. The notes grew shorter. Then stopped coming altogether. When I landed the Johnson account, a local restaurant chain I'd pursued for months, Michael took full credit at the office celebration. I confronted him in the kitchen as he refilled the ice bucket. You didn't even attend the final meeting, I said, keeping my voice low. Why did you tell everyone it was your strategy that closed them? Come on, Lily. He kissed my cheek, ice clinking in the bucket between us. We're married now. What's mine is yours, right? Does it really matter whose name is on the contract? 6 months later he moved my desk from our shared office to the main workspace. I carried my marketing degree and framed industry awards past curious employee eyes. We need the executive office for client meetings, he explained. And you're so good with the team they need your guidance. The team I had hired and trained now looked to Michael first. My nameplate disappeared from the door the following week. By month's end, our letterhead changed from Michael and Lily Adams co-founders, to simply Michael Adams CEO. When I questioned it, his response seemed reasonable on the surface. It's cleaner this way. Less confusing for clients who need a clear chain of command. I began cataloging moments I'd previously overlooked. How he'd place his hand on my lower back during meetings right before interrupting whatever point I was making. The slight chuckle whenever I offered input on strategy. My wife has such creative ideas, he'd say, as if creativity and business acumen couldn't coexist. His parents visited from Phoenix last spring. Over dinner at our home, his father Gordon, whose insurance company had mysteriously never employed his wife of 40 years, provided unwitting clarity. The Williams brothers deal, Gordon reminisced while sawing through his steak. Your mother thought she had insights to share on that one. He laughed, gesturing with his fork. I reminded her there's a reason men handle business matters and women handle home matters. Across the table, Michael's mother Eleanor silently topped off Gordon's wine glass, her eyes never meeting mine. Dad ran a tight ship, Michael said, raising his glass. Learned from the best. I watched something pass between father and son. Approval, continuity, tradition, while Eleanor methodically cut her food into ever smaller pieces. I saw my future sitting across from me, silent and diminished. The introductions to clients evolved so gradually I almost missed the pattern. First, meet my wife and business partner, Lily. Then, this is Lily, my wife, she handles our internal operations. Eventually, our office manager Lily will take care of those details. Each demotion delivered with the same winning smile. Each one erasing another piece of the business I had built. I should have recognized the breaking point earlier. Maybe when he started holding executive strategy sessions, that somehow never included me despite my co-founder status. Or when I discovered my signature was being applied digitally to documents I'd never seen. Or perhaps when Jessica, our new marketing coordinator, came to me confused about why Michael had introduced me as our first employee, when her research had shown I was co-founder. Instead, it took today's meeting with David Harris to fully wake me up. Harris Developments represented the biggest potential client in our company's history, a real estate conglomerate looking for comprehensive rebranding. I'd prepared for weeks, developing concepts specifically tailored to David's vision. 10 minutes into my presentation, Michael cleared his throat. What Lily is trying to say, he jumped in with an indulgent smile, is that we can certainly handle the female demographic targeting while focusing on the serious investment messaging. David frowned slightly but nodded. I continued, showing the market research. Our surveys show that 47% of real estate investment decisions are actually initiated by women, even when. Lily, Michael interrupted, his tone pleasant but firm. We're running low on coffee. Would you mind refreshing everyone before we get to the numbers part? I stood mechanically, taking the coffee carafe from the credenza while Michael smoothly took control of my presentation slides. As I poured coffee into David's cup, Michael leaned back in his chair. Don't worry about all the technical details. She's just a pretty face around here, but we keep her busy. A drop of coffee splashed onto the polished table. I didn't wipe it away. David didn't laugh at Michael's joke. Instead, he watched me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Something between curiosity and recognition. I returned to my seat, suddenly seeing everything with perfect clarity. 7 years building this company. 8 years loving this man. All condensed into just a pretty face. As Michael continued talking about market penetration strategies, I wasn't listening. I was mentally reviewing the company bylaws I'd drafted. The ownership structure we'd established. The clauses I'd carefully inserted that Michael had signed without careful reading. After all, why would he bother reading the fine print when dealing with just a pretty face? After that meeting with David Harris, I started seeing our company, and my marriage, with new eyes. The office I once walked into with pride now felt like a stage where I played an increasingly diminished role. But I wasn't ready to exit quietly. The week after the coffee incident, Michael left for a 3-day executive retreat in Chicago. With him gone, I decided to review our quarterly financial reports. Something I hadn't done in months. Not because I wasn't interested, but because Michael had gradually taken over all financial oversight, insisting he didn't want to burden me with the boring stuff. I unlocked his office drawer with the spare key I'd never returned and pulled out the manila folders labeled with each quarter. What I found made my stomach drop. Several expenses were categorized oddly. A $23,000 payment listed as equipment upgrade didn't match any office improvements I'd seen. 3 consecutive monthly payments of $4,500 to a company called Westridge Consulting that I'd never heard of. And most concerning, a series of transfers moving significant portions of our profits to an account number I didn't recognize. I photographed everything with my phone, careful to return the folders exactly as I'd found them. That night I couldn't sleep. The numbers swirled in my head, along with a growing suspicion I didn't want to face. 2 weeks later, our neighbors hosted their annual Memorial Day barbecue. I was in the Wilsons' kitchen helping arrange desserts when I heard Michael's laugh from the patio. Through the window I spotted him with Tom Landon, his college friend who occasionally consulted for our firm. She's completely clueless about the West Side deal, Michael said, lowering his voice, but not enough. And I want to keep it that way. Tom glanced toward the house. She is still legally co-owner, Mike. Don't you need her signature eventually? Michael took a swig of beer. Technically yes. But she signs whatever I put in front of her these days. She's so caught up in her little office projects she doesn't even read the fine print anymore. I turned away, the plate of brownies trembling slightly in my hands. So Westridge Consulting was connected to something called the West Side deal. And Michael was deliberately keeping me in the dark. That night after Michael fell asleep, I slipped into our home office and logged into his email. His password hadn't changed in years. Our first dog's name followed by his birth year. So predictable, so careless. So convinced of my compliance. The first email appeared 3 months ago from Tom. West Side Branch Office Proposal. Mike. Attached is the revised business plan for West Side Marketing Group. I've updated the revenue projections based on the potential clients you mentioned. If we position this as a separate entity from Adams Marketing Solutions but leverage your existing client relationships, we could be operational by Q4. Once you're ready to pull the trigger, I can connect you with my real estate guy about that River North space we looked at. Prime location for the Chicago market. Let me know when you want to tell Lily. Or if you want my advice, maybe wait until it's a done deal. Easier to ask forgiveness than permission, right? Tom. I scrolled through dozens more emails. Plans for a Chicago branch office under a different name. Detailed discussions about which clients they would transition from our main company. A separate business plan where Michael was listed as sole owner with Tom as COO. My name appeared exactly nowhere. My husband was planning to siphon off our most valuable clients to a new company that would exclude me entirely. The next morning, I checked our joint personal account while Michael was in the shower. We'd always maintained this account for household expenses, with separate accounts for personal spending. The balance was lower than it should have been. Scrolling through the transaction history, I found the reason. Golf club membership renewal $8,000. A weekend at a luxury hotel in Chicago $2,300. A receipt from Tiffany & Co. for $4,750. A purchase I'd never seen. Meanwhile, I'd been cutting back on my own expenses, worried about cash flow after Michael mentioned we needed to tighten our belts last month. I'd canceled my gym membership, started coloring my own hair, brought lunch from home, all while he was spending thousands without discussion. The final piece fell into place a week later. Karen, our company accountant, stopped by my desk with benefits enrollment forms. Sorry these are late, she apologized, setting the folder beside my keyboard. Things have been crazy with the restructuring. I looked up from my computer. Restructuring. The share redistribution, she clarified, then hesitated at my expression. Wait, has Michael not reviewed that with you yet? I assumed since the paperwork came through. I've been swamped, I said carefully. Refresh my memory on the details. Karen lowered her voice. The new ownership structure. Michael will hold 60%, Tom Landon gets 25%, and the remaining 15% is distributed among senior management. She frowned. I thought you would have been first to know, being his wife and co-founder. Of course, I forced a smile. Just making sure we're talking about the same paperwork. Thanks, Karen. After she left, I sat perfectly still at my desk, my mind racing through everything I'd discovered. The separate company. The drained accounts. And now, a planned redistribution of ownership that would dilute my stake from 50% to nothing. I wasn't even included in senior management, apparently. The betrayal was complete, documented in emails, bank statements, and corporate filings. Michael hadn't just been diminishing me professionally, he was systematically erasing my place in the company we'd built together. That evening, I declined a dinner invitation from Michael, claiming a headache. Instead, I drove to the lake where we'd once celebrated landing our first major client. The water rippled under the setting sun as I sat on our favorite bench, my mind unexpectedly calm. I had been a fool, but no longer. The paper trail Michael had carelessly left behind would become my roadmap forward. I pulled out my phone and called an old law school friend, one who specialized in business divorces of both kinds. Taylor? It's Lily Adams. I need your help with something confidential. How soon can we meet? As I hung up, I felt something shift inside me, grief giving way to determination. Michael had left a paper trail of betrayal. I would use it to find my way back to myself. I met Taylor at a quiet cafe 20 miles from our office, far from any potential familiar faces. She hadn't changed much since our college days. Still direct, still wearing her signature red-framed glasses, still ordering black coffee with exactly 1 sugar. So let me get this straight, she said after I laid out everything I'd discovered. Your husband is systematically pushing you out of your own company while draining your joint finances and planning a new venture that excludes you entirely. That about covers it, I said, tracing the rim of my untouched latte. Taylor didn't offer sympathy, which was exactly why I'd called her. You need a crash course in corporate self-defense. Starting now. The next day I changed my lunch routine. Instead of eating with coworkers in the break room, I began taking my sandwich to my car, propping my tablet against the steering wheel. Taylor had sent links to several online business courses: corporate structure and governance, shareholder rights in closely held companies, financial statement analysis. I devoured them like oxygen. Each lunch break became a mini semester in my silent education. I took notes on my phone, careful never to leave a digital trail on company devices. I learned about minority shareholder protections, fiduciary duties between business partners, grounds for proving financial malfeasance. How was lunch? Michael would sometimes ask, barely looking up from his computer. Same as always, I'd reply, the business law terms I'd just learned still buzzing in my head. 3 weeks into my self-education program, I began noticing Jessica, our new marketing coordinator, watching me with curious eyes. One day she followed me to the parking lot. Mind if I join you? She asked, tapping on my window. I hesitated, then unlocked the door. Jessica slid into the passenger seat, her lunch in her lap. I know what you're doing, she said quietly. And I want you to know you're not alone. She explained how Michael had hired her with promises of growth and creative freedom, only to sideline her ideas and take credit for her work. 2 other employees had similar experiences. A small group of them had started documenting everything. We don't know what you're planning, Jessica said, but whatever it is, we want to help. I studied her face, searching for any sign this was a trap. Michael underestimates people he considers beneath him, she added. That's his weakness. That afternoon, I asked Jessica to gather some old contract files, watching as Michael barely registered her presence when she entered his office. Invisible just like me. A potential ally I never would have noticed if I hadn't become invisible myself. With Jessica's help, I gained access to the complete archive of company contracts. For 3 nights straight after Michael had fallen asleep, I sat in our home office reviewing every document we'd ever signed. In the original formation documents, buried in section 12.4b, I found what I was looking for. Any transfer of shares exceeding 15% of total company ownership requires written consent from all original signing partners. I read it 3 times to be sure. Michael couldn't legally redistribute ownership without my signature, not even with digital authorization. The clause had been my idea years ago when we were just starting out, to protect us both from outside investors. Now it was my lifeline. During the day, I maintained the perfect facade of the supportive wife and compliant employee. I brought Michael his favorite lunch, listened attentively in meetings, and never questioned his decisions publicly. At home, I prepared dinner, asked about his day, and pretended not to notice when he made late-night phone calls from our back porch. You seem different lately, he commented one evening as I handed him a glass of wine. More relaxed. I smiled, thinking of the consultation I'd had with Sarah, my college friend who now specialized in high-asset divorce cases, just that afternoon. Just accepting my place, I guess, I replied. The following week, I received an unexpected email from David Harris requesting a private meeting to discuss some creative approaches to his company's marketing needs. I showed Michael the message. Odd that he'd reach out to you directly, Michael frowned, clearly annoyed. I'll take the meeting. Actually, I said carefully, he specifically mentioned wanting my input on female consumer targeting. Might be better if I handle this one. Michael hesitated, then shrugged. Fine. Just don't make any commitments without running them by me first. I met David at a downtown coffee shop, expecting a brief, perfunctory discussion about demographics. Instead, he got straight to the point. I've done my research on Adam's marketing, he said, sliding a folder across the table, including your role in building it. Inside was a printout of an industry article from 3 years ago, featuring Michael and me as marketing's power couple. My name was highlighted in every paragraph where our achievements were discussed. I recognize talent when I see it, David continued. And I recognize when talent is being wasted. What happened? For a moment I considered maintaining the facade. Then I looked into David's direct gaze and decided on a calculated risk. Business partnerships evolve, I said carefully. Sometimes in unexpected directions. And marriages? I didn't answer directly. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Harris? Two things. First, I want you, not your husband, to handle my account. Second, I want to know your plans. My plans? I've been in business 30 years, Mrs. Adams. I know when someone's preparing for a significant change. The question is whether I want to be on the right or wrong side of that change. I considered my options, then made a decision. I might be considering a restructuring of my own, but I'm still researching the possibilities. David nodded, seemingly satisfied. Harris Developments values forward-thinking leadership. When you're ready to discuss possibilities further, my private line is on the back of my card. As we parted ways, I realized I'd gained something unexpected in my education. Not just knowledge or allies, but a potential future beyond the company Michael was trying to steal from me. That night, I added David's number to my growing list of resources while Michael snored beside me, blissfully unaware that his dismissive introduction weeks ago had opened a door he couldn't close. The perfect little assistant was learning quickly, and some lessons would cost him everything. As summer turned to fall, Michael's confidence ballooned into something bordering on recklessness. He began leaving important documents in plain sight. Acquisition plans, client lists for the Chicago office, even the draft of the new company structure showing the redistribution of ownership. There was a certain freedom in being underestimated. He no longer bothered hiding things from someone he considered irrelevant. "You'll have the quarterly reports ready by Friday, right?" he asked one evening as we prepared dinner, chopping vegetables side by side in our kitchen. The domesticity of the scene almost made me laugh. Here we were, playing house while he planned to dismantle everything we'd built together. "Of course," I replied, sliding diced onions into the pan. "Along with the client satisfaction surveys you wanted." "Good girl," he said, patting my shoulder as though praising a child. "I need everything perfect for next week's board meeting. David Harris is bringing his executive team." I kept my face neutral, though my grip tightened on the knife. "The whole team? That sounds promising." "It's practically signed," Michael boasted, reaching for his wine glass. "Harris called me personally to say he's ready to move forward. This deal will put me on the map in Chicago." Me. The casual correction said everything about how he viewed our partnership now. "You've worked hard for this," I said, which wasn't a lie. He preened at the compliment. "Sometimes I think you're the only one who really sees that. Tom keeps pushing for more equity in the new venture, but he doesn't understand what it takes to be the face of a company." I nodded sympathetically while mentally adding Tom's dissatisfaction to my growing list of leverage points. Michael had a talent for creating disgruntled allies. The following morning, I called Sarah from my car in the grocery store parking lot. "I'm ready," I told her. "How quickly can we file?" "The papers are prepared," she replied. "We just need your signature. When do you want to pull the trigger?" I thought of the board meeting scheduled for next Tuesday, where Michael planned to announce the Harris deal and likely hint at the Chicago expansion, achievements he fully intended to claim as his alone. Monday, I decided. I want it done Monday morning. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated. Jessica had provided documentation of Michael backdating contracts. Karen, our accountant, had hesitantly confirmed suspicions about financial improprieties after I'd approached her with specific questions about expense categories that didn't add up. And 2 other senior employees had come forward with evidence of Michael taking credit for their work while cutting them out of commission structures he'd promised. Most importantly, I'd secured copies of all original formation documents proving my equal ownership, along with proof that I'd never signed off on any transfer of shares, making any attempted redistribution a clear violation of our operating agreement. Meanwhile, I'd quietly moved half of our joint savings into a separate account, legally permissible as a spouse according to Sarah, and documented every questionable personal expense Michael had charged to the company over the past year. On Friday, Taylor met me for lunch at a restaurant near her office to review our strategy one final time. "The timing is critical," she emphasized. "The divorce papers will be served Monday morning at the office. The temporary restraining order preventing him from making major business decisions will be filed simultaneously. Then at Tuesday's board meeting, I present the evidence of financial misconduct," I finished, and invoke the clause requiring my signature for any share transfers. Taylor nodded approvingly. You'll effectively block both the Chicago venture and the redistribution of company shares. But are you ready for his reaction? It won't be pretty. I thought about 7 years of gradual erasure, of watching my contributions be dismissed and my presence diminished until I was nothing more than the woman who poured the coffee. I'm ready, I said. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I rehearsed what I would say at the board meeting, practiced keeping my expression neutral when Michael inevitably tried to dismiss me, and prepared separate folders for each board member containing documentation of everything I'd discovered. Michael spent Saturday golfing with Tom and Sunday working in his home office, completely oblivious to the storm about to break. When he asked me to iron his favorite blue shirt for Tuesday's meeting, I did so without complaint, pressing perfect creases into the fabric that would clothe him during his downfall. Monday morning arrived with a crystalline autumn clarity. We drove to work separately, me claiming an early meeting, him stopping for his usual workout at the gym. I arrived at the office first, nodding calmly to the receptionist as I passed. At 9:17 a.m., just as Michael stepped out of the elevator, a courier approached him. "Michael Adams?" the young man asked, extending an envelope. I watched from the coffee station, my hand steady as I stirred cream into my cup. Michael's confusion turned to shock as he skimmed the contents. His head snapped up, eyes scanning the office until they locked on mine. For perhaps the first time in years, he actually saw me, not as an accessory or an assistant but as an adversary. He stormed toward me, divorce papers clutched in his hand. "What the hell is this?" "Exactly what it looks like," I replied quietly. "I believe Section 4 outlines the division of assets, including my 50% stake in Adams Marketing Solutions." "This is ridiculous," he sputtered, his face flushing. "You can't possibly think." The office had gone silent, all pretense of work abandoned as everyone watched our confrontation unfold. "I don't think, Michael." "I know." I picked up my coffee cup and turned toward my desk. "Oh, and you might want to call Tom. He'll be receiving similar papers about the West Side deal. Forming a competing business using existing company resources while still employed as an officer? That violates at least 3 clauses in his contract." Michael followed me, lowering his voice to a furious whisper. "You won't get away with this. You're nothing without me, nothing but a pretty face playing at business." I smiled, genuinely amused at his predictability. "We'll see who's playing tomorrow, won't we? David Harris and the board are expecting quite a show." He spent the rest of the day barricaded in his office, phone calls audible even through the closed door. I calmly completed my work, finalized preparations for the board meeting, and left at exactly 5 o'clock, nodding politely to colleagues still wide-eyed from the morning's drama. Tuesday dawned bright and cool. I dressed with particular care, a charcoal gray suit, crisp white blouse, the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. Armor for the battle ahead. As I applied my lipstick in the bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who had poured coffee while being humiliated weeks ago. She had edges now. Purpose. And most importantly, power that had been there all along, waiting to be reclaimed. I arrived early to prepare the boardroom, arranging folders at each seat, setting up coffee and water. When Michael entered, his confident stride faltered at the sight of me already there, perfectly composed. "This changes nothing," he hissed as board members began arriving. I simply smiled and picked up the coffee carafe, ready to play my role one last time. The boardroom filled quickly with nervous energy. Our 4 board members took their usual seats, followed by David Harris and 2 executives from his team. Michael entered last, impeccably dressed in the blue shirt I'd ironed, his smile firmly in place despite the slight twitch in his left eye, a tell I'd learned to recognize over the years whenever he felt cornered. "Gentlemen," he greeted everyone, pointedly ignoring me as I quietly poured coffee for the attendees. "Thank you for joining us for this momentous occasion." My hands were steady as I moved around the table, filling each cup with practiced precision. This role, the silent, decorative wife, had been my prison. Today it would become my weapon. "Before we discuss the Harris Development Partnership," Michael continued, "I'd like to announce some exciting structural changes to Adams Marketing Solutions. As you know, expanding to Chicago has been our goal for some time. Today, I'm pleased to share that we've secured a prime location in River North and will be launching Westside Marketing Group next quarter. He clicked through his slides, showcasing the gleaming new office space and projected revenue streams, all while carefully avoiding any mention of my conspicuous absence from the new venture's leadership. This strategic expansion, Michael pressed on, will require some restructuring of our current ownership model. I took my position at the side of the room, coffee carafe still in hand, and waited. I've prepared documents outlining the new distribution of shares, Michael said, nodding to his assistant to pass out folders. You'll see that this creates opportunities for senior leadership to gain equity stakes while concentrating decision-making authority for more efficient operations. David Harris flipped through the pages, his expression unreadable. The other board members exchanged glances, clearly sensing the tension in the room. Questions? Michael asked, his confidence visibly returning as no one immediately objected. I have one, I said, setting down the coffee carafe. Michael's smile tightened. Perhaps we should address board questions first, Lily. Mine is relevant to the documents you've just distributed, I replied, walking to my chair at the table, the one Michael had clearly not expected me to occupy. Specifically regarding Section 12.4b of our original operating agreement. The board chairman, Robert Wilson, adjusted his glasses. Which states what exactly? That any transfer of shares exceeding 15% of total company ownership requires written consent from all original signing partners, I answered, opening my own folder. I've highlighted it on page 3 of the documents I've provided. Michael's face darkened as the board members opened the packets I'd prepared. What is this? Demanded Frank Peterson, our most senior board member. Evidence, I replied calmly. Financial records showing unauthorized transfers to accounts associated with Westside Marketing Group. Communications detailing plans to divert clients and resources. And most importantly, proof that I never signed any authorization for the share transfers Mr. Adams just proposed. This is absurd, Michael cut in. My wife is clearly upset about our personal issues. Ex-wife, I corrected. The divorce was finalized this morning through an expedited proceeding. And these aren't personal issues, but fiduciary violations that directly impact this company's future and your investments, gentlemen. David Harris leaned forward. I'd like to hear Ms. Adams out. For the next 17 minutes, I presented the evidence I'd gathered, clearly, methodically, without emotion. The unauthorized financial transfers. The secret formation of a competing business using company resources. The backdated documents. Through it all, Michael's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally, dawning horror. Additionally, I continued, while reviewing our bylaws with legal counsel, we discovered that Michael's attempt to transfer controlling interest without proper authorization triggered Clause 23, the bad faith provision. This automatically converts temporary controlling interest to the non-violating partner, me, pending board review. I slid the final document across the table. A legal verification signed by 2 corporate attorneys and notarized that morning. She's making this up, Michael finally sputtered. She's just the office manager, for God's sake. David Harris raised an eyebrow. Actually, according to every document I've reviewed before considering this partnership, she's your co-founder with equal ownership. Unless those materials were misrepresentations. The room fell silent as the implications settled over everyone. Michael's face had gone ashen. Gentlemen, I said, addressing the board, I'm not asking you to choose sides in a divorce. I'm asking you to recognize an attempted corporate theft and take appropriate action to protect this company's future. Robert Wilson removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. I believe we need to call an emergency executive session. Mr. and Ms. Adams, if you would step outside. Just one moment, David Harris interrupted, turning to Michael. You assured me this partnership was on solid ground. That everyone key to its success was on board. He shifted his gaze to me. Is Harris Developments still welcome in this new arrangement, Ms. Adams? I met his eyes steadily. Absolutely. But with transparent terms and proper oversight. I'd be happy to rework the proposal to reflect actual market rates rather than the inflated figures you were presented. Harris nodded, something like respect flickering across his face. I look forward to those discussions. This is ridiculous, Michael snapped, desperation cracking through his polished veneer. She's just a pretty face. Tell them, David. Tell them who you've been negotiating with all along. The client smirked. Interesting. Coming from someone who just signed over controlling shares to his wife. The room went dead silent. I picked up my water glass, fighting to keep my expression neutral as years of dismissal and humiliation finally found their counterbalance. Ex-wife actually, I corrected, raising my glass slightly. Divorce finalized this morning. I kept the house, the company, and your parking spot, Michael. He choked on nothing, his face flushing crimson. I smiled, sweet as saccharine. Next time read my fine print. The aftermath unfolded in waves. The board emerged from their closed session with a unanimous decision to honor the legal transfer of controlling interest, placing me as interim CEO while they conducted a more thorough financial investigation. Michael was escorted from the building by security, his key card deactivated before he reached the parking lot. Word spread through the office like wildfire. Jessica was the first to appear at my new office door, Michael's former space, with a bottle of champagne and tears in her eyes. We knew you were up to something, she said, but this is magnificent. Others followed, some jubilant, some wary, all curious about what would happen next. I addressed the entire staff that afternoon, standing at the front of the conference room where I'd been humiliated so many times. Changes are coming, I told them, but not the ones you might have feared. No mass layoffs. No Chicago office at the expense of Minneapolis operations. Instead, we're going to rebuild this company on transparency, merit, and genuine collaboration. My first actions as CEO focused on stability. I promoted Jessica to creative director, a position she deserved for months. I initiated audits of all client accounts to ensure proper billing. I met individually with each employee to assess concerns and gather ideas for improvement. The company didn't just survive the transition, it thrived. Within 3 months, we'd retained every major client and added 2 new ones. David Harris not only stayed but expanded his contract, personally referring 3 other businesses to us. You understand value, he told me over lunch one day. Both in business and in yourself. That's rarer than it should be. The personal transformation proved more challenging than the professional one. Years of systematic diminishment had left deeper scars than I'd realized. I started therapy, began reconnecting with friends I'd neglected, even took up kickboxing, feeling my strength return with each jab and cross. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation, I barely recognized my life. The company had its most profitable quarter ever. I'd moved from our suburban house to a downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and no trace of Michael's preferred beige-on-beige aesthetic. My confidence had returned, not as arrogance but as quiet certainty in my own worth. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Michael Adams is asking to see you, she said, her tone suggesting she'd be happy to send him packing. Curiosity won over caution. Send him in. He entered hesitantly, looking both familiar and foreign. 6 months had etched new lines around his eyes, and his designer suit hung slightly loose on his frame. Lily, he nodded, remaining standing even when I gestured toward a chair. You're looking well. What can I do for you, Michael? He shifted uncomfortably. I'm launching a new consulting practice. Small scale, nothing that would compete directly with Adams' marketing. Still using the name, I see. It's mine too, he said defensively, then caught himself. Look, I'm not here to fight. I'm bidding on the Westridge account, and they're asking for references from previous major clients. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here he stood asking for my help to rebuild what he'd tried to steal from me. What exactly are you asking? A reference letter? Or just permission to list Adams' marketing as a previous affiliation? I studied him, searching for the man I'd once loved, the partner I'd once trusted. He wasn't there. In his place stood someone I barely recognized and no longer feared. I'll have Jessica draft something appropriate, I said finally. Basic confirmation of dates and role. Nothing more, nothing less. Relief washed over his face. Thank you. I appreciate it. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Michael? The nameplate from your parking spot? I had it framed. It hangs in my office at home. His expression tightened, but he said nothing as he walked out of my office and my life. I turned back to my window, gazing out at the Minneapolis skyline. The view reminded me of how far I'd come, not just from being the woman who poured the coffee, but from being the woman who allowed herself to be diminished in the first place. Some lessons come at a steep price. But as it turned out, I was very good at reading the fine print and writing my own terms. Did Lily's revenge story resonate with you? That moment when the underestimated finally triumphs is something we all crave. Subscribe for more empowering stories, hit like if you felt that sweet satisfaction, and comment which moment gave you the biggest yes feeling. Don't miss our next revenge tale.